What's good, YouTube? Today we're going to go over 5 classes that are going to be safe picks going into the Season 2 Mythic Plus of Dragonflight. The first class that I think is going to be a very safe pick heading into the next season is actually the Warlock. Warlocks are a ridiculously tanky class, especially as they've headed into Dragonflight. They have a ridiculous amount of passive shields that they gain throughout encounters. They have strong defensive cooldowns on a short cooldown as well. They have high health pools, allowing them to survive those one-shot mechanics, and also they bring health stones to your group, which is not only a benefit for them, but also a benefit for your group. And if you're spec'd into the right talent, then you'll also get an extra little bit of healing whenever somebody in your group actually uses their health stone. Speaking of utility for Mythic Plus, they also bring gateways, which can be used for some skips in certain scenarios. We'll just have to figure out where they're going to be next season. In niche scenarios as well, they also bring summoning stones that can help you skip mobs without the need for your whole group to waste their potion on an invis potion. So they definitely do bring some unique utility that all groups would need in Mythic Plus. Looking at the Demonology Warlock specifically, then they have an absolutely busted tier set going into next season. They get massive cooldown reduction on their Grimoire Felguard, which also turns it into basically a melee tyrant, buffing up your demons and also doing big priority damage itself, which you can perfectly pair with your tyrant now as well, as they're both going to be on around a 1.5 minute cooldown. This is an amazing damage profile for Mythic Plus because it is Giga for AoE and also single target, but also specifically priority damage if you're in an AoE encounter and there's that one mob that you do need to take down that much quicker. Your tyrant and Felguard are going to be slamming into that mob while the rest of your rotation takes care of the AoE aspect. This is going to line up pretty perfectly for every single pack and every single boss, so you're always going to have damage, and also great damage at that. Affliction Warlock, as we've seen in the first season, has some bonkers AoE, especially on mass AoE. We've all seen those clips of Affliction locks in that first room in Algathar Academy, where I've seen them surpass 1 million DPS, which not many classes in the game can do. So on those bigger dungeons, in those fortified weeks, Affliction could definitely be a play, especially with the burstier damage profile they're bringing into the next season from their tier set. Destro is also another great spec of the Warlock for Mythic Plus. They do have a bit of ramp time with their Rain of Fire spam, but this means that they scale really well with those higher keys. There is lots of talk about their tier set as well at the moment. I know a lot of people aren't too happy with it, so we might see a fix on that or some damage tuning for it. So I wouldn't count their tier set out just yet, because I think that Destro Lock could end up very strong for next patch. And even with some of the best AoE in the game that they actually bring some decent single target damage too, which is also going to be helped by their tier set for next patch. Warlock is looking really strong going into next season. I would definitely advise you to pick it up as one of the safe picks for Mythic Plus. You can swap in and out of specs depending on the key, what dungeon it is, or what affixes are present on the key itself. So you really do have an answer for every single scenario, and that's why I think you should pick it going into next season. If you're enjoying the video, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Next, we're going to go for a bit of a wild card. We're going to go with the Shaman. All 3 Shaman specs are looking pretty great for next season. Being one of the few classes that actually bring Bloodlust, you have a massive advantage just from that alone. You have some great utility that you can offer to your group through all the different totems. You have AoE stuns in the form of Capacitor Totem. You have Thunder Shock as well, which you can turn into an AoE knockup that's going to interrupt any casts. As an enhancement Shaman specifically as well, you have Sundering, which is another AoE stop. All 3 specs boast the shortest kick in the game in Wind Shear, and you have some great off heals in the DPS specs through Ancestral Guidance. Enhancement Shaman specifically was one of the best DPS in Season 1, and it doesn't look to be slowing down too much going into Season 2. The tier set did eventually get fixed. It has just recently been nerfed, but it is still looking very strong, giving you a huge bursty damage profile on a 45-second cooldown. It has great damage in all scenarios, especially some prio and funnel damage if you're spec'd into the Elementalist build. And with all those melee mechanics that we do face in Mythic Plus, it is great to have a spec that is a bit of a hybrid between melee and range. So if you have any downtime, you can still get some casts off at a distance, for example your Frost Shocks. So Enhancement is looking like a great pick for next season, and it might end up being one of my picks. Elemental is looking to have a very strong tier set going into Mythic Plus. Getting those extra Stormkeepers every 40 seconds is going to be ridiculous. They already have a great damage profile as it is for Mythic Plus. They're very bursty class, and this tier set is just going to help them out that much more. They've got decent single target and amazing AoE. Just like the Enhancement Shaman as well, you can turn your AoE into funnel damage for those prio targets by spreading your Flame Shocks and then turreting those Lava Burst procs into one specific mob, and they bring some nice off heals for your group as well. Restoration Shaman really creeped up towards the end of Season 1, and it's looking like a very strong pick going into the next Season 2. They have great damage output for a healer, which is essential to Mythic Plus and speeding up the efficiency of your keys. They have very strong heals, especially when the team is taking massive damage through their mastery. And all of the Shaman specs going into Dragonflight did get that extra buff to their defensives, which they definitely struggled with in the past, but it doesn't seem to be that big of a problem anymore. So these are the reasons why I think you should pick the Shaman going into next season for Mythic Plus. Time for a class that's not always a safe pick, but definitely is going into next season. We have the Paladin. Paladins coming into Dragonflight got a battle res to add to their copious amounts of utility that they already had. You've got all the different blessings to help out with your group. You've got off heals. You've got the new Retribution aura, just increasing the damage of your party overall over the course of a key. So even from just a utility standpoint, you really can't go wrong with the Paladin. Prot ended up as the king of the tanks in season 1 towards the end, just because it was able to scale so much better into those higher keys and deal and mitigate the damage better that they were taking. And this doesn't seem to be changing going into season 2. Prot is looking very strong, and it also has the utility with their cleansers, etc., which is looking very handy for next season. And this applies to the rest of the Paladin specs as well. Protection Paladin also brings insane off heals that actually allowed a no healer meta comp in the season 1. It's not looking as strong going into next season, as the mobs are going to be doing more damage, and I think the off heals did get nerfed a bit, but this is still some big carry potential that the Prot Paladin can bring, just taking care of the group and helping out the healer wherever possible. And as a Protection Paladin, I feel like you get even more benefit from using abilities like Blessing of Sacrifice, as the extra damage you take isn't really going to be too noticeable, and you can save your party members if your healer's struggling. Retribution got a full rework going into 10.7, and there's no way if they put that much work into it, they wouldn't let it be strong. They have an amazing damage profile for Mythic Plus, as their cooldowns are pretty much on a 1-minute cooldown, and they are very, very bursty as well, which is a desired damage profile for Mythic Plus, especially on AoE. The Retribution Paladin is going to shine. They're super tanky as well. They've got multiple different defensives that they can use. They've got obviously their bubble immunity as well, which is massive. And as Ret Paladin, you're going to be sitting in Retribution aura, so you're going to bring that extra damage to your group. Holy Paladin is also always a great healer for Mythic Plus. I think it's personally always slept on just because of how it heals. In Mythic Plus, especially in higher keys, you don't really have time to sit around casting 2 or 3 second heals, and the Paladin does great at instantly healing your group and just topping them up. This is amazing for the frequent burst damage that always is going out in Mythic Plus. Not having to worry or pre-plan too much, you can just press one global and pretty much top whoever's in your group. And being a Paladin as well, they are a very tanky healer. It's also always nice for your healer to have a battle res, so that is a big perk. All 3 of the Paladin specs are looking very strong going into next season. I think specifically keep an eye out for Ret Paladin. It's looking very strong, and like I said, with the rework, I'm sure they're going to want it to be strong as well. The next safe pick for next season, I'm sure, comes as no surprise to you guys. It's the Rogue. Rogue is always the king of Mythic Plus, pretty much. I would bet on Rogue pretty much every single season, regardless of their damage. They have insane amounts of stops through Cheap Shot, Blind, Gouge. You've also got Kidney Shot, and you've got Sap, which is one of the very few crowd controls in the game that actually allows you to skip mobs without getting in combat with them. And if that wasn't enough, obviously we have the Shroud that the Rogue brings as well, allowing us to choose for more optimal routes, getting our Bloodlust on cooldown for scary packs or scary bosses, and just opening up the dungeon completely, allowing you to time it as efficiently as possible. Subtlety Rogue is a great pick, especially for mass AoE dungeons. Unique to the Subtlety Rogue as well, you got some of the best CC from the Rogue itself, allowing you to triple Cheap Shot for free, so you can constantly get those stuns out. And finally, for the Subtlety Rogue as well, you have some amazing single target burst with your Shadow Dance windows, so any phases that you need to push, Subtlety is your go-to. Sub is also one of those few specs in the game that has one of the best funnel damage profiles in the game, allowing you to turn mass AoE into nuking down one big prio mob. You do unfortunately lose your mass AoE for this, but overall you do just speed up the key massively, as you don't want to take out the whole pack with your group and then just sit there on one prio mob that hasn't died because it's got such a high health pool. Outlaw also has some great prio damage that translates directly into cleave damage as well through their Blade Flurry. This is a great damage profile to have because they can always sink their big damage into one priority target and then passively cleave on the rest of the pack. It's got strong single target, and it always has its cooldowns up due to their Restless Blade Blade's passive, always reducing the cooldown on their Adrenaline Rush, and also some other important abilities. Assassination Rogue isn't the greatest spec, I won't lie, for Mythic Plus, but it does bring some great single target and priority damage, and being a rogue, it still brings the insane amounts of utility and stops that the rogues do bring. Specifically to the Assassination Rogue, you can actually triple silence with the Garrote talent, allowing you to lock down those caster mobs at the start of packs and also whenever you vanish. It's no shock that Rogue was in this list. Rogue is always going to be an amazing pick for Mythic Plus just based on the utility that it brings, so if you were looking to main one next season, get involved. The final class that I'm going to recommend you guys for next season is the new hero class, the Evoker. Being the new hero class, Blizzard are probably going to want people to play it, therefore they're probably going to make one of the specs pretty strong, and I don't know if it's died down, but I did hear that the Evoker was potentially getting a new spec going into 10.1. You guys will have to let me know down below if that's still actually happening. They're another one of the few classes that are bringing Bloodlust to your group, so this is going to be especially nice if you're going to be pugging for the majority of next season. Devastation specifically has some of the best upfront AoE damage in the game. Due to how their mastery works, all of their damage is pretty much front loaded, and you will see some ridiculous numbers coming out of them at the start of pulls. They have a very strong tier set going into next season. There's been a few bugs, but they have been fixed, and the tier set is doing about 10% of your overall at this current state. They also got a rework going into next patch, which is looking to make their AoE even stronger. It's opening up some more talent points that you had to sink into talent nodes before, so that's going to be an overall buff to the spec, and it's just looking very, very strong. The same goes for Preservation. Although it's a healer spec, the upfront damage from the Preservation Evoker is pretty unmatched when it comes to healers. This allows them to get all of their damage out the way up front, so that for the rest of the pool they can focus mainly on healing when they've already got all of their damage out. They have some potent cooldowns through Rewind and also time dilation for the tank. They've got insane amounts of mobility through their hover ability, also allowing them to heal on the move, which has definitely been very underrated for Mythic Plus, specifically for the Evoker because of their long cast times on some of their abilities. And they also have a bleed dispel, which is going to prove very, very handy for your tanks and your group next season. Evoker is looking like a very safe pick going into next season. It's a lot of fun. It's very mobile. It brings some nice utility to your group, especially through abilities like Zephyr. And so that is why it's made the list to being a safe pick for Mythic Plus in Season 2. So those are going to be my 5 safe classes for you guys to pick going into Season 2. These classes are all very valuable in their own way for Mythic Plus. So let me know if you guys agree with the classes that I put into this video. And if not, let me know down in the comments which classes you would recommend going into Season 2. If you enjoyed this video, then drop a like down below. Subscribe to your boy if you're new. And until next time, I'll catch you guys later.